Franchise Secrets, Erik Von Horn.
If you're not a part of the Franchise Secrets Facebook group, what are you waiting for? It's franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. I cannot believe how valuable this group turned out to be. When someone asks a question, the feedback is honest, authentic, very helpful, and it's from multiple perspectives. If you're not sure that you're getting the most accurate information about franchising, then check out the largest, most helpful Facebook group in all of franchising. Whether you're a Z, a ZOR, a buyer, or investor, join our free Facebook group at franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. In this episode of Franchise Secrets, I'm talking to Mike Reynolds of Mosquito Mike. He's one of the Franchisor or Mastermind members. He has a handful of franchisees. And one time he said no to a potential franchisee that was ready to write him a check. And he knew that they were not going to be a right fit. Great guy, all kinds of really good things, but he said no. And I'm like, Mike, I love it that you are an emerging brand. You need franchisees. You had somebody and you said no to them. We talk about how he was a part of a brand as a franchisee that was a complete disaster. And I mean a disaster. The franchisor ended up going out of business, getting sued. All kinds of bad things happened. And yet with all of that, Mosquito Mike just about went bankrupt, but he came out of that, started in the mosquito business, and the rest is history. Enjoy this episode with Mosquito Mike. Mike, man, I remember having a mastermind session with you and some others in the Franchisor Mastermind, and you'd mentioned that all you want is to get new franchisees, but you had a check in hand from one franchisee. They were ready to pay you, and you said no. And I'm like, holy cow, here's this guy, a newer brand, handful of franchisees, said no to a franchisee. I'm like, that takes guts, and that's the right decision to make. And that's why you're on the podcast today. So, dude, before we get to that, tell us your story. How in the world did you get into franchising to begin with?
Well, I be quite frank. I used to be in the mortgage business, and I had an opportunity to get in with a tax franchise, not the same one that you were in, but they were young and they were growing. I got a chance to buy the first one that was opening in my state. And I was all excited about that because, mortgages is very up and down, as we're about to enter it down.
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
I have mortgage friends right now thinking like, holy cow, I've made a killing. And now what do I do? So This is very timely for all the mortgage people.
So I figured the tax business would be great because there's a nice steady increase in between my up and downs with mortgage business. The problem is right after I opened the tax franchise, the bottom of the mortgage market just cratered out with the Great Recession, and all the lenders just stopped lending. It was no money for anywhere. It was just it's a disaster. So I'm like, well, at least I've got my tax office. The problem was is the tax franchise turns out that they were not exactly the most reputable place. Ended up getting shut down by the government for of all things.
The brand got shut down.
The brand got shut down for of all things not paying their taxes.
And that's a true story. I knew that competitor when we were in the business. I remember being in the conference room with the sales team, and we're like, who's this competitor? By the way, that competitor had some pretty good people that spun out of that and have done some amazing things in franchising. Absolutely. Like yourself. So, but yeah, so the tax franchise that you bought got shut down, and now you found yourself in the tax business without a franchise.
Correct. So I stuck with the business for a little while. We scrapped their model because it was garbage. Figured if we were going to fail, it was going to fail my own way. So we just got rid of everybody, redid everything from scratch, and stuck with that. And I also got into a little bit of payroll. Payroll was really where taxes and payroll were really my first, touch at recurring revenue. With the taxes, everybody comes in once a year and gets their taxes done. But with payroll, that's like the ultimate recurring revenue model because people need to get paid every week. And if you don't pay your bills, if you don't pay your employees, then your business shuts down. So there's no getting out of it. The only problem is it's a grind because just like you need to make sure the employees get paid, as a payroll company, you can't take a vacation, you can't take a day off. It's like it's constant all year round. So I ended up getting out of that, selling off my client base, and then I had nothing to do. I had 3.5, I built up my tax business so I could work for 3.5 months and not work the rest of the year. But then I was just bored out of my mind.
How many locations in the tax business, your franchise turned mom and pop? How many locations did you have?
Well, when we were the franchise, I followed the model I was given, and we had 2 permanent locations and 15 temporary ones, so 17 total.
In check cashers and places
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, yeah, it was brutal. So, but once we got rid of it, I scrapped everything and just went to a single office and just figured I'm going to do every return. I'm going to do everything. It wasn't a business at all. It was essentially my job. And we just built from scratch, one return after another. It got better every year. And, but then once again, it was 3.5 months and nothing else to do.
So was it just you? Did you have anybody else working for you at that time?
Yeah, over time, I added people. But again, it would be new people every year because it's a seasonal business, and sometimes it's just the way it goes.
So you're sitting there, you have this tax business, you're in there. We love the tax business because you're only working in the winter, a handful of months out of the year, and then there's nothing to do. So you're bored out of your mind.
Yep. So, I'd done various sales things or whatever, but nothing that was serious. So on a lark, I took a job with one of the mosquito companies, doing some spraying. It was nice, no, what do you call it? It didn't take a lot of brain power, let's just put that.
Or stress. You just had to show up.
Exactly. So, but I worked for them for like 2.5 weeks, and I realized that I could do it better than they were doing. But I had committed to them, so I worked through them for the rest of the season. I learned as much as I could. And then during the off season, I put together my own program. And then I opened, up the following season just as Mosquito Mike. Now, the thing is with it is I had zero intention of this becoming a franchise or anything big. It was just supposed to be my side gig to keep me busy in between tax seasons. The problem was it kept doubling, and then it would double, and then it would double again. And it was just, it just kept steamrolling to the point where, at first it was, it was running out of my driveway. And then I had to buy a bigger house with a bigger driveway. And then I tapped my well. And then, and then I had to move to commercial space, and then we got a bigger commercial space. And it just, where it kept steamrolling like that, it just seemed a shame to keep it to myself. I was familiar with the franchise model and the idea of it. Also very sensitive to the plight of the franchisee if you end up with the wrong people. So it's important to me to make sure that, it gets done right.
So how many seasons did you have that Mosquito Mike before you decided to franchise it?
We franchised after the, was it third season, fourth season?
So you had a good amount of seasons under your belt where you learned and different things before you decided to franchise.
Oh yeah, I made all the mistakes first.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, what were some of the mistakes that you made? What were some of the things that you're like, oh my gosh, I learned this year number 2 or year number 3 that you known year number 1?
Yeah, well, some of it was marketing. Some of it's product based, vendor based. There's equipment. You try different things. There is a million things that you can think of, and a million you would never think of, that you kind of have to go through the process to get there. And what's been nice is we've been able to learn from all that and put it all together in one package.
Well, let's talk about starting a franchise, because you're in my mastermind for franchisors, and we have some fun discussions in there. But it's always interesting for people that aren't in a mastermind with other emerging brands, or they're thinking about starting a franchise. I get messages weekly about people starting a franchise or wanting to start a franchise. I had 2 of them yesterday alone. One in the roofing space and one in the moving space. So like, when you decided to franchise, you knew a little bit about franchising from a bad franchisor. How did you, what were the steps that you went through to actually become a franchisor?
What I did was I went to a consultant, someone who specialized in franchising, somebody who knew all the things that I didn't know. And then using them to learn various pieces of it and to help me put together my documents. And then we brought in the proper attorneys. I made sure we had all of our ducks in a row. You don't want to, this is not something you want to half-ass. If you're going to do it, you got to do it right. And then, so we took all that, put it together. And then, and then even then, you don't get everything. Some of it you just have to learn, through trial and error.
Attention franchisors, if you are not bringing in many of the right franchisees, sales are slow. It's stealing too much of your time as a founder trying to award franchises to the right franchisee. There's a better way to do it. That's why I started the Franchise Sales Mentor. If you want to have access to the information, the techniques, the ways that the best franchise sales organizations are awarding franchisees, then you might want to check out the Franchise Sales Mentor. The reasons that franchisors join is because they want access. They want access to my Rolodex. They want access to my connections. They want access to shortcut both short-term and long-term success to increase enterprise value to their brand. There's a couple of different ways to go about doing it. You can go to a consultant where they can help you out. And I would say it's probably how much money? Less than $80,000 for less than $50,000 to go from no franchise to a franchisor. Is that what your experience was, or were you more than that or less than that?
Yeah, it cost me a little bit more than that. So you're talking about the actual becoming.
Like hiring the consultant. So you hire the consultant. So someone that has a mom and pop business, they want to be a franchisor.
Yep.
So you can hire a consultant. You need to get your FDD, some training documents, and your ops agreement, ops, and all of that stuff. How much would you estimate that costs you to go from no franchisor to actually having a document where you could sell your first franchise location?
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's about 90,000. I know you can do it for less. You can do it. The people that I chose, I chose for a reason.
Yep. And there's different ones out there. You can go less, and some people are charging $100,000 and you don't get much for it. Some people are charging $100,000 and you get a lot for it. Some people are charging 50 and you get as much as you get for the $100,000. It's just, There's a lot of different characters out there in doing that. So just don't base it off of price. And just like, as franchisees investigate franchisors, talk to a few different consultants, a few different groups doing that. The other way to do it, not use a consultant and have, and then go to an attorney, have them draft the agreement for you, and then go hire experts in their different fields, whether it's putting a training manual together or, some of these different things. So I think the easier way to do it, hire a consultant, do it for less than $100,000. I would say you get a good product, or you can spend more than that and kind of doing it yourself in different ways. So why did you choose consultant over doing it all yourself, the attorney and this, that, and the other?
Honestly, I read a book and, I read the book and I liked what it had to say. And, I didn't want to take any chances. The company that I chose, was expert in the field, is well-known. And that's what worked for me. There's people out there willing to, take a little bit more of a chance, or, these days there's enough information on the internet that you can figure out a lot of this stuff yourself. If I was going to do this, I wanted to make sure I did it right, and I didn't want to take any chances. And that's just the way I chose to go.
So are you happy with how you got started?
Yeah. I mean, there's always things that you would change. There's always things that you like. There's always things that you say, well, this should have been better based on what I was paying for. But in the end, I don't really have any complaints.
That's good. And I hear that a lot. There's a lot of different consultants out there that are doing this that are really good. And there's a difference between a franchise consultant and a consultant that's helping you become a franchisor.
Oh yeah.
Two very different things. So I just want to make sure that we distinguish between a franchise consultant or broker that's helping sell franchises versus the group out there that helps people go from a mom and pop to a franchisor. So are you still using the same attorney that drafted that first FDD?
I am. I'm moving away from them for trademark, stuff. But as far as the actual FDDs and everything's still the same from day one.
That's great. So I know we spent a bit of time on that. I think some people will find that helpful because they're just not sure where to go. And there's so many questions in the Franchise Secrets Facebook group on that kind of exact topic. So do you want to name the name of the consultant group that you work with, since you had such great things to say, or you want to not share that right now?
No, that's totally fine. I chose to use the iFranchise group.
Okay. And the iFranchise group's been around for a long time.
Yes.
So that's great. So now, all of a sudden you worked with them, and now you have your FDD and you're ready to start selling franchises. What happened next?
Nothing.
Wow, that's so surprising. Let me ask you this: what did you think was going to happen next?
Oh, you figure, you get your nice little website, you go, make all your little videos, and you put it up, and you think the world's going to come to you. you hire somebody to plug you on Facebook. I mean, not in Facebook, on on Google and AdWords, and point people to your site, and you just think though everybody's going to come raining in to buy your business. And yeah, that's not the way it worked out.
Crickets. Yeah. So, I mean, that's called what happens. Like people, that's so common, but like, cause we all hear the stories, like Dirty Dough. One of my portfolio brands is Dirty Dough, and they are just selling franchises like crazy. Like, we were literally telling them you can be very selective on who you bring in. We're going to talk about that pretty soon with you, but we're telling them, like, you are having a problem that most franchisors would dream about. There are people just wanting to buy. I got text messages from Bennett yesterday saying, where do I wire funds? Where do I wire funds? He's like, you need to do all these other things. You're not even approved yet. You can't wire funds. So that's a unicorn, but that's what all of us people that want to get into franchising, we hear about that. And we're like, I want to be Crumble. I want to be Dirty Dough. I want to be some of these. And the reality is what you just described. And usually it's crickets. So how long was it before you kind of got your first good lead?
Ooh, it's a good question, because I had hired a franchise sales organization, because we decided that I didn't have time to do it. I was running the business. I was running, had a couple of things going on at the time between the tax office and the mosquito business. So it made sense to bring in somebody with experience. Then I hired them, and then they were working just off of portal leads, because I didn't know any better. So I was just, buying, whatever I could get my hands on. And it wasn't until, I don't know, maybe the fall when we actually started looking at the broker groups. And so we finally got in with them, and then, we didn't have the right, we didn't have the right mix and everything in place. And then, so how long was it to the first good lead? I'm not even sure. I do know
how long for the first franchisee? Like, so from
we got our first two in. So we had started, I think, in the spring, and then by the end of the new year, by the time we hit the new year, we were at two. And then
hey, that's not bad. I mean, that's probably, that's better than zero.
Yeah, definitely better than zero.
And I talked to franchisors that go 9 months without a franchisee. And so, and were both of those franchisees from the broker networks?
One of them was.
The other one was friends and family, or
actually an employee who desperately wanted one. And so
awesome.
So that worked out very well. So, but it was funny, the one we got from the broker, our franchisee actually brought us to the broker, not the other way around. So because
what do you mean? Like,
well, they live in one of my territories, and they see our signs everywhere, and they see how, well we do. And they're like, we want that. And, of course they wanted to buy their hometown, which they couldn't have because I was already there, but they've since pretty much landlocked me. They bought almost everything on, that they could get around me. So that was nice.
Yes. How active are you in the business right now? Personally, in your location?
What's funny is I almost feel like, it's weird. I'm like, I'm not doing anything. I've got it set up. So it's I ask these guys, I'll go away. I got married this summer. I went whitewater rafting. I went camping. Last year, I took a month off and went to Oregon, and, they don't need me at all. I come back expecting to put out fires, and they're like, yeah, no, we got nothing for you. We're good.
I know this is true because you've been on these mastermind meetings when you're going whitewater rafting, when you are camping. So I know this is completely true. So who's running the business for you? Like, do you have like a district operational manager? Do you have just a key ops person, a CEO? Like, who is the main person that is running that business for you?
I've got basically two guys. One works operations with a secondary part in sales. The other one works sales with a secondary of operations. They sort of overlap shifts, and they run everything out of there. But it's funny because even my franchisees, you'd think that they're new franchisees, they'd be coming to me. They don't come to me. They go to them. It's like why am I even here?
Yes. Well, I love that because, I love that you have a location. So, it's one of the things in franchising. Some people are like, well, you as a franchisor, you don't know the business anymore because you're not in the business, and not meaning you're not working the business. You don't own the business. So I love that you own the business. And I think it's great as a franchisor to be able to have key people that are on your team, which they're basically part of that franchise. Are they on part of corporate, those two guys, or are they just on the location itself?
You're talking about
your two guys that are running your
they run the primary location, and then they are essentially consultants for the franchisees.
Good. And I like that. Bader's Coolian did something similar like that with Fit Body Boot Camp, where they have he calls them their franchise business coaches. They are people that are in the business. And so you have people that are helping your franchisees that are in the business every day. And obviously they're doing an amazing job. So where did you find them? Was that the original plan, is to hire two people that oversaw those two aspects of the business?
Well, what we're doing measured growth. So, as the volume improves, we're bringing on more people. And, obviously we've got plenty of temporary people. Those are year-round people, and we're actually adding more of those coming up here soon. But the first guy who's running the whole stuff, he started out as a greeter for my tax office.
No way.
Yep. So he went through and started with me greeting, then went to go work for one of the other tax franchises, then actually ended up getting management experience running their operation up here. And then he came back to me, and, he's done a great job. And the other guy actually had moved cross country and was working locally, working solar and some other stuff. And then he came on and has done a very good job for us as well.
Well, people that have solar roofing backgrounds, they are any type of door-to-door sales backgrounds. They're great for, for a service-based business like that. So that's amazing. The only thing that would make that story better, instead of having a greeter turned, rock star manager for you, would be a waiver. At Liberty Tax, we had waivers. Or a sign spinner. That would make it an even better story. But that's a pretty good story right there. All right. So then let's get into you saying no. Like, that's why we're here, because you're an emerging brand. You weren't a unicorn. And you said no to somebody that had a check in hand ready to make a big deposit into your bank account. Why did you say no? Tell us that story.
Well, it's tough, because obviously as an emerging franchisee, you need franchisees to help you grow, for credibility and for others' sake. But you also have to make sure that they all share your vision, because what you don't want to do is bring on people that have a different idea of what it is that you're doing, and this particular gentleman, loved his personality, huge smile, infectious, funny guy. He had been a truck driver his whole life. And, he wanted to get out of the truck, and he wanted to own his own business. And he was a smart guy, nice guy, but he only wanted to replace his truck driving job. He wanted to own it, and he wanted the job, but he didn't actually want to expand it at all. So, he would have been great probably in his first year, great personality, wants to be in the truck. He's going to go out there and, treat all his customers right. They're all going to love him. And he's going to max out his truck by the end of his first year. And then what's going to happen? He doesn't want to hire anybody. He doesn't want to have any management. He doesn't want to have anything. He just wanted to have his little business, and he would make money doing it. But then I'd have an entire territory that was capped. So despite the fact, he was coming check in hand and saying, this is what I want, it didn't make sense for us, because when we walk into a market, we want to own the market. We want to come in and sort of, take whatever's been built there before by whatever competitors are in place, and then build on it. Bring more recognition to the industry in general, and get as large a market share as we possibly can. And you can't do that if you're only going to do one truck.
And did he come out and say, I only want one truck? Or did you have like open, honest conversations about that? Or did you just get a sense? How did that take place?
No, it was an open conversation. He had always been a worker, and he wanted to stay a worker, and there's plenty of franchises out there that will, love that. There's a lot of owner operator franchises out there where it's a one person operation, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but it's not really where we're going as a business. And so we didn't really have much of a choice. We kind of had to say no.
I love that. Was it kind of, did you think twice about it? Like when you're doing that? Cause
Oh,
I
it
can
hurt.
imagine. Oh, I bet. Because you think like, well, they might change. They might decide that they actually like to make money, that they could actually make more money by doing this and whatnot. Did you ever have any of those internal discussions in your head of like why you
But
might want to approve
we're
him?
like, oh, well, maybe we can help him hire a manager. Maybe we can have somebody else run the business and he can just do the spraying, and then hire more people. But that's just an accident waiting to happen. You know,
Well, I mean, big kudos to you for doing that. Like that caught my attention. I talked to other emerging brands that make these types of choices. And I talked to people that are a little cynical towards franchising, or they think everyone's just out to sell them. And I have these discussions privately, like you and I had at least a month ago about this. And these are conversations, everyone, that I get to have privately with franchisors, with people like Mike over at Mosquito Mike saying, I just told somebody no. And so anybody that's out there looking to buy a franchise, like there are some franchises that will take anyone that is, breathing and has enough money to write a check. But there's a lot of franchisors, emerging ones that would certainly be happy to have your money, but they will say no because they don't think you're the right fit. So when you go to Discovery Day, when you're going through the process, don't think that they are all just trying to sell you. Because if you would have met Mosquito Mike and you had a different plan for the business than what he has for that particular franchise, it would have been a hard no. And I just think that's amazing. So I love that about you.
well, I think the most important thing is that whoever comes on board, whoever becomes a franchisee, they need to be profitable, and if they're going to cap their own profits, it doesn't help them and it doesn't help us. Whereas what we want to do is bring people in that have the ability to expand their business, to expand their profits, to get to the point where I'm at now, where I've got other people running it for me so they can go off and do whatever it is they want to do.
What's the sense of responsibility that you feel as a franchisor for bringing on new franchisees, and some of them are putting a significant percentage of their net worth on the line? Like what's the weight that you feel as a franchisor?
Well, when I did the tax franchise, that almost bankrupted me. I was promised one thing, shown pictures of these room full of people getting their taxes done. They were telling, oh, you just got to average this amount per tax return. They didn't mention the $300 worth of junk fees that were put on top. You had to charge like $700 for a 1040 EZ in order to make the numbers that they were promising. And I think it was before there were certain laws in place. They were able to say whatever they wanted to say to make it happen. And it did not end well. So they were stealing from us, they were stealing from our clients, and it was a tough experience. But because of that, it's extremely important to me to make sure that all the franchisees have the best opportunity to succeed. And whether that's making sure that I put them in the best position with our marketing or the tech stack that we're using, or the training, the things about recruiting and everything else. I think we need to put them in the best position to succeed. And that's really what we're looking at.
So let's compare and contrast. So we've got big competitors out there, like Mosquito Hunters is pretty big. You and I were just on the conversation with those guys over there in a private meeting, which is awesome, having two competitors talking about things together in the same industry and mutual respect. So we were on with Mosquito Hunters, a bigger franchise, much bigger franchise. I know Kevin over at Mosquito Joe. I knew them when they were just a tiny little operation. Then he had a nice exit to that. And Kevin's a great guy. So I have a number of their franchisees in the franchisee mastermind. So people have a choice of going with they may have a choice. I should say that they may have a choice. Territory always matters. If your territory sold, you don't have a choice. You have to go with an emerging brand that is in your backyard. If all the bigger ones are sold out, and you'll be there someday, Mike. Like you'll be the big brand one of these days, probably sooner than later, because all of a sudden it will happen. But right now, you are an emerging brand. There are advantages to going with a Mosquito Mike over a Mosquito Joe, a Mosquito Hunters, or whatever the larger brand is. So in general, why would someone want to go with a small emerging brand like yours with a handful of franchisees versus one with a lot of franchisees?
Well, if you are going with an established player, somebody who's been around for, I don't know, 10, 20 years, whatever it happens to be, what you're going to find is that they are what they are. You can't do that much to change what they are. They're the runaway locomotive going down the tracks. You're not going to make an impact of that. Whereas as a smaller franchisor, okay, everybody that comes in, we want to contribute to what it is we're going to be. We want them to be a part of the experience, a part of the growth, part of the story. And I think that's important.
Why do they, like, if we were to talk to your franchisees right now, what do they say that they love about, Mosquito Mike or, the emerging brand, a young emerging brand? What are some of those things that we would be hearing from them?
Well, I think that they'll agree that the business is exactly what I told them it was. They didn't get into it and find out it was something different. Because the last thing I want to do is sell somebody a bill of goods. I got to look that person in the eye, and I'm responsible as far as I'm concerned for their success. I know legally I'm not, but morally and here I am. And so that's important to me.
I think that's important to the expectations are accurate. And that's where I think a lot of people in validation, they just start validating and they don't really validate the right way. And you can validate so many things besides, like, how much money did you make? Like, how much money did you make is not necessarily the right question, because there's so many variables. They might have experience in that particular industry, or they hired a manager that came with a book of business, or there's so many different things that can skew those numbers. Or franchisors have a lot more flexibility in the item 19 than the average buyer even knows about. They don't know how numbers get into the item 19 in the FDD, and they shouldn't, because they haven't paid. Not that they shouldn't know that. They shouldn't, because they just don't have the experience in it. And that's what I mean by that. So the question is, do you have an item 19? First of all, I want to get that out there. Do you have an item 19 in your franchise disclosure document?
Absolutely.
So you have an item 19, and then how would you want people to validate that? Like, what would be the way that they validate that those numbers are accurate?
Well, right now, because the franchisees are all in their first year, it's basically just based on corporate numbers. So what we did do that's a little different, that we've got the corporate numbers, but we also did a proof of concept territory. So, because I didn't intend to become a franchise in the beginning, I was just a guy running a business. And so when I put all this stuff together and figured it out, well, we had to test it somewhere. So we didn't have any franchisees, and it wasn't exactly fair to just, toss them to the wolves and say, well, I'm here, so, just accept it. So what we did was we took an area that we'd never dropped a dime of marketing in, that we'd never done anything in, and went and started from scratch with that location just to see what would happen. And that's what the results of that territory is what we're using to benchmark for new franchisees as they come in. So, we're actually in year 2 on that one. So we know exactly what we did in year number 1, so they can benchmark against that. And now we're going to have a year number 2 as well, so the franchisees can see where they fall in line.
So where did that idea come from to have a second territory benchmark based on kind of the franchise model?
That was based on me, because I if I was in their shoes in a similar situation, that's what I'd want to know, because it's great that you've got a business that's succeeding, but how is that relevant for me, in this state or that state or whatever? You need to, you didn't have a territory restriction, you didn't have any of the hurdles that a new franchisee may have. And so it's important to make sure that we were going to be able to compare apples to apples, as opposed to giving some pie in the sky.
So here's the deal with the Franchise Tribe Mastermind. It's full of a bunch of successful franchisees across many different industries, many different brands, and you get to be a part of that. Now, if you've had any level of success in franchising, you've probably been around top performing Z's in your current brand. So think about that. And if you could do that with 40 plus different brands, industries, franchisees, That's the value in the mastermind. I bring in some of the best speakers in the world. We talk about some topics that will never be talked about anywhere else. So if you're interested in being a part of a group like that, check out franchisetribe.com. So here's a bit of gold for all you people that are trying to understand how to validate and look at the item 19 specifically. A lot of times, if you're looking at an emerging brand, they, like what Mike just mentioned, they don't have territory restrictions because they weren't a franchisor when they were doing that. And so you don't know how big that territory is. And so that would be something to dive into a little bit. And I could spend a lot of time on that, but I don't want to. I don't want to. That's kind of more private conversations that we have in the franchisee and franchisor mastermind. But the point of it is, there's little things that you just don't know, and you are at a disadvantage as a franchise buyer because the franchisor knows a lot more. They have a lot more experience than you do. And you're just at a disadvantage. It doesn't mean you shouldn't buy, because I love franchising. I have ownership in franchisors, but I love to be the guy out there that's giving honest, accurate information so buyers can make better, well-informed decisions. And I love the fact that you actually did a kind of a test territory like that. And that's in the item 19. So one of the ways that I would think that I would want to validate with that is if I'm looking at Mosquito Mike, I realize that there's a first year kind of territory in there. I would go to these first year franchisees and how did you do against that first territory? Because that's the expectation. If I'm a new buyer, I'm like, okay, that's the expectation. I'm going to have X amount of revenue, X amount of customers. Then I go to these other franchisees and like, you're in your first year. Have you or are you on track to hit the numbers that store did? Or does Mosquito Mike, did he just pick the most amazing second territory? And that's why those numbers are so high. So I wouldn't care if they're a little bit higher or a little bit lower, but if they're similar, I would think that's a really good thing. And I would imagine, I don't know, we've never talked about this. So this isn't you saying any of this. This is me. I would imagine that you can have some franchisees that are doing better than that, some franchisees that are not doing as well as that first territory. So, but that's how I would validate. And I just sometimes, I have that list of 100 plus questions for franchisees to validate, but those would be some of the specific validation questions that I would have if I'm looking at a Mosquito Mike with that particular item 19 in there. And I also think what Mike said earlier on, you have your expectations as a buyer, and you want to validate that those are accurate. And sometimes they are, and sometimes they're not. So you have these expectations of startup costs and revenue that you want to make, ultimately net profit, but revenue is a decent benchmark. Ask these franchisees if the startup cost was accurate. So you start to do a lot of that stuff. That's how you start to validate a lot of these different brands. Mike, anything to add to that, or am I wrong in some of that?
No, I think you got it nailed.
All right. Well, and the other thing, why don't we just hit on this too? Franchisors can't really deviate from that item 19. There's certain things, like I would love to ask Mike right now, but he can't talk about it because he can only talk about numbers that are in the item 19. Anything outside of that, he or his sales team or people that are working with him can't really talk about. So what do you think about that? Like, sometimes you wish you could just tell people more than what's in the item 19, or are you glad that you can't? Like,
I don't know. I think that it would be, having been the victim of certain things being said, if you didn't have those restrictions, then people could just say whatever they wanted, and that's how people end up getting hurt. So I think the item 19 is a good thing. I think if somebody doesn't have an item 19, you should be a little worried, but that's just my personal opinion. If someone's afraid to put their numbers down, that's not a good sign.
I would also imagine, and this is just for all you franchisors out there, your numbers are probably not going to be as high, or not going to be the highest out of all the mosquito brands out there. I'm just guessing because I have lots of conversations with a lot of different brands that have competitors, and some of their fears of putting an item 19 are, hey, such and such a brand has higher numbers than me. I was talking to someone in the junk removal business, and they're like, these other brands have higher numbers than me. But then if you don't put your actual numbers in, how are people going to know? And so they ended up putting their actual numbers in the item 19. They were lower than some of their competitors, higher than others, but I would say very average and very accurate. And lo and behold, they started to get more traction in their sales process because they had that in there, because the franchise buyers were able to kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together. So I'm a huge fan of the item 19, just like you are. Hey, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about making sure these franchisees that you bring on share your vision and just being upfront with that. So, go wherever you want with that. But I know that we all have a vision as a franchisor, as a business owner. You have your vision on that. How do you want your franchisees to share in that?
Well, for me, this business is all about one thing, and that's whether you want to be a hunter or a farmer. As a hunter, there's plenty of business out there. You go out and you make your one sale and you kill it and it feels great and you get a nice big paycheck. But then you got to go out and get your next one and your next one and your next one. And if you ever get to the point where you don't want to hunt anymore, well, then the business dies. Whereas in the mosquito business, it's a recurring revenue business. You sell it once, but then you get paid over and over and over again, year and year and year going forward. It's become just short of cutting grass, as far as the customer go-to home service. If anybody wants to use their backyard, they almost need the mosquito service at this point. Nobody wants to be the one who gets bitten at the barbecue. Nobody wants to have their kids, come in with ticks on them. So it's become an essential service. I mean, I know it was viewed that way by the government, when we went through COVID, so we didn't get hit, like anybody else. And, supposedly, when everybody's supposedly pulling back for the supposed recession that's coming, we haven't seen any signs of that at all either. Because, you can want to cut back costs all you want, but if your wife says to you, I'm getting bitten, the kids are getting bitten, do something about it, they're going to call you.
What did you find surprising? Because you said supposed recession. We just don't know what's going to happen. I believe, obviously we're in high inflationary times. People don't have as much money, but there's always surprising things that happen as economic times change and shift. You've been through it. That better than most with them being in the mortgage industry. What have you seen in the mosquito business in general before COVID, during COVID, and kind of where we're going? Like what kind of, from an industry standpoint, what are you seeing?
Industry-wide, the mosquito business grows about 19% a year overall. I know GDP isn't anywhere near that. Pest control in general is in the low single digits. But mosquito as a category has just totally taken off. And it just year after year, it's been very consistently getting, more and more households, are realizing that they need it. It's not an option anymore.
What do you think? What do you think the future of the industry is? Are there changes coming to the industry? Because I know some of the franchisees that I talk to have like misters that go off at different times. I believe something like that. Like, what are you seeing as the evolution of the mosquito business?
Well, I think more and more it's going to become more of a service. I don't think it's so much a product-based thing as what you're referring to there. Those are nice, but they're expensive to put in. They require constant maintenance, and they're not really quite as effective, in my personal opinion. When the service in general is designed to be the chemicals we use nowadays, it's designed to break down in the environment. So it's very friendly overall. Breaks down over a period of time, so that it's not like you're pumping chemicals into the atmosphere and having them build up like things used to be. Now you put it in there, it breaks down in the sun, it breaks down in rain, and it disappears, and then you've got to replace it, or it comes back.
So my wife would never let you come spray anything at her house. I have to beg her to have the pest control guys come out to the tool shed to kill black widows. So, I'm exaggerating there, but kind of exaggerating there. but she's definitely on the no chemical or low chemical side. How has that business changed? Like, give me some of the timelines. Because I mean, there was a time when chemicals were everywhere, and now things are definitely changing. So what's kind of been the evolution of that in the past?
Yeah, when I first started, maybe 5% of our sprays were all natural. And now it's up to about 22% this year. So it's gone up quite a bit over the last few years. And we're expecting that percentage to continue to go up as we go along. Just as people, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, are the consumers demanding that? Are they the ones that are driving that?
We give the option. That's something we usually present to people when they call in. Would you prefer this or would you prefer that?
So my question is, like, how effective are the natural things? When I think of tea tree oil and vinegar or whatever it is, seems to solve everything for some people out there. And for people like me, like, no, you need some bleach to kill this, or you need some, like, how effective are the natural solutions versus the more chemically type solutions?
Well, we worked really hard on our all natural option. And so our respray rates, basically the percentage of people that we go back to again after a spray because they feel like they're still getting bitten, it's actually very similar to the chemical. So they're within fractions of a percent as far as effectiveness goes. You will have some areas that just get overwhelmed and they can't handle it. But overall, your average person, you can really do either or, and you're going to get about the same results.
Dude, my wife is going to love to hear that. So we don't have too many mosquitoes where we live. That's a good question too. Like, seasonality of it. Like, like different markets are probably much better than other markets. Florida, I would imagine, is a solid market. South Dakota, for many different reasons, is probably not the best market. So can you talk about franchisor perspective on territories and markets across the country when you're in a business like that?
Well, I think depending on where you are as a franchisee, you're going to have between 2 and 5 months off every year. I'm up in the Northeast. We basically run from April to mid-October, and then we're done. The rest of the year is just used for planning or whatever. I've got one of my franchisees all excited because they're skiers. So they're going to get the whole winter off to go skiing before their season starts. And the big thing is I mentioned before the recurring revenue nature of the business. But what's nice about that is you don't have the same worries that a lot of the other businesses have, because you sell it once, you get the customer, and then you keep your customer base. The following year, you advertise again, and it builds on top of that. And then each year you maintain the majority of your customers, and then you build on top of it, you build on top of it, you build on top of it. Makes it really, really easy to scale. It also takes a lot of the stress out of owning a business. You don't have to all these worries about each year. How am I going to do this year? How am I going to do this year? If you do everything the way you're supposed to, chances are you're going up. It's just a question of how much bigger the business is going to be.
Who's the ideal person to own? Like, who are some of your backgrounds and some of your franchisees, and who do you think is ideal to own a seasonal type business like a mosquito business?
Yeah, we have, like I said, we've got limited franchisees at the moment, but we've got a former high school coach, an athletic director, and who also was dabbled in small business and operations. We've got another couple there. That was one couple, and then there's another couple that both came from the photography side. They were a division of Shutterfly, and then left that corporate life to own. And then the other franchisee is an employee, so he's just sort of moved up through the ranks. And then first chance he got to buy when he did.
I love that. So you got corporate people, you got people that dabbled in small business, and then even best of all, you have someone that was on the inside of your operation that decided to become a franchisee themselves. So I love that. All right. What else do we need to cover before I let you go? What kind of last piece of advices would you give to the audience that you want to share with them?
Well, I think the one thing I'd say, obviously I mentioned recurring revenue of pest control because, and mosquito control, because that's what I do. But no matter what business they're going into, whether it's this or something else, you can look at having a subscription model, whatever business you're going to. If you just look around you, they're all over the place. You got Netflix, you got the software as a service, on the tech side, but you also have things like Taco Bell. The lawn care services are like the ultimate Every year they come out and they mow your lawn. They don't even call you to ask you. They just show up and start mowing. At the end of the year, they stop coming. The next year they start again, and everybody keeps paying them. It's all over the place. But you can take any business and do that. I mean, if you paint a house once every 5 years, well, you could take that same business and set something up where they pay you a small amount every month instead of one huge check, and you come out and paint one side of their house a year. Maybe they trim the 5th year. Who knows? I mean, you can do anything that you want to as long as you're creative about it.
I'll go ahead.
Okay, it doesn't have to be a large percentage of your business to be recurring to be helpful. Because if you can get off of that always hunting and just create a little field that you're farming in, it'll help even out your spikes and make things a lot more easier for you in the long run.
I think it's a good point. Any business, you just think about getting in front of that customer, whether it's a little thing, you're in front of that customer again, and have been with franchisors, looking at ways to be in front of that customer, whether it's on text, email, in person, phone call, whatever it is, like a reason where they want you in front of them. And then once you're in front of them, you have an opportunity to sell them your service again, an upgrade, an upsell, or something more. So I think any brand out there that doesn't have something reoccurring, start to look at what your competitors are doing that might be reoccurring, whether it's a warranty service, an inspection, or something like that. And that goes a long way. And you can probably get in front of your customer, increase the average ticket, average lifetime value of a customer, all kinds of different things. So I love it. Mike, so good to have you on. You and I are about ready to go get on a masterclass in the Franchisor Mastermind. So we better shut this thing down. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Franchise Secrets Podcast. Whether you're watching or listening, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to whatever channel you're listening on. If you want my help with anything from buying a franchise to franchising your business, please visit franchisesecrets.com.